Let us begin today's class, and let us first dedicate today's class in loving memory of Mr. Dennis Dems and Dr. Jerry and Joanne Lesson, and Mr. Ryan Dems, sponsored by Lauren and Randy Lesson. And we are officially in the second half of the course. Whew, we got to start getting ready for the next course. Who's excited? Decoding the Talmud. Even if you're not excited about Talmud in relation to relationships, no pun intended, still come. If you're enjoying this class, it means you'll enjoy also the next course, even if it doesn't sound as exciting, even if you don't get CEUs. Okay. But dear friends, we are moving on over here to lesson 4, the art of positivity. Here's the idea of the art of positivity. Here's the story. There was a town, and it was an old Jewish tradition in this town that they would never bury anybody unless somebody could share something positive about this individual. Like Jewish tradition, we don't put anybody in the cemetery unless the community could send them off on a good note, say something good. Problem was, there was one guy, and he was horrible. And his day came, the end of his line, and he's there, and the rabbi is there for the funeral in the synagogue and says, would anybody please like to volunteer to get up and share something about our esteemed member who passed away? And nobody showed up. Nobody was willing to say anything good. He said, nobody. We can't bury him unless somebody could share something good. And everybody said, this guy was a scoundrel. He was a no-goodnik. He was horrible. He was a miser. He was greedy. He was selfish. What are we supposed to say about him? Did he ever say a good word to anybody? Could anybody get up? Nobody could get up. And the rabbi said, I'm sorry, we cannot bury him until somebody gets up and says something good about him. There's like this awkward silence in the room. Finally, an elderly Jew in the back gets up and says, oh, I think I have something to share about him. So they say, yeah, what could you share about him? He says, his brother, he's a lot worse. Compared to his brother, he was a pretty good guy. Oh, perfect. Now we could bury him. But you know what? A few years later, the brother passed away. Oh no, now we're in even worse shape. Can anybody say something good about him? Nothing. And they're like, listen, we barely got his brother in. You want to know this guy? The rabbi said, I'm sorry, we cannot bury him until somebody shares something good. This is ancient Jewish tradition in our little town for hundreds of years, who knows when. We can't do it. The elderly Jew gets up again and says, because of him, we were able to bury his brother. There you go, it worked, it did the trick. He was a wise man, yes. Okay, l'chaim, dear friends, we got a very important topic tonight. And
It's good.
You see, part of the problem of being in a relationship with people is that people are not perfect. And people's imperfections get in the way of us having, good, seamless, enjoyable relationships. Just those snags in the road, and all of a sudden those things which annoy us and offend us, and who knows what. People are not perfect. That is a big problem in relationships. That's what we're all facing. That's the challenge of relationships. That is what we're going to be talking about today in the art of positivity. How could we deal with this? This is the problem. The problem is we're dealing with people, and let's be realistic, people have got problems. Okay, now, that being said, what sticks more? When somebody gives you a compliment or somebody gives you an insult? What sticks more? The insult, right? It's interesting. Somebody could even give you 10 different praises. It doesn't matter. One stinging insult and it's over. And this is what psychology tells us is we have a very big bias as humans to negativity. And this is a very big part of the problem, that when we are trying to approach relationships, those negative things are actually the ones that stick to us the most. And they're the ones that last the most. That's what we're going to be talking about today. We've got a real problem on our hands. So now I'm going to show you a video, this time the real lesson video. And it's going to be introducing us to our problem here. So Elkie, let's get both of the lights. And Alex, all right, thank you. Look at that.
Yes, okay, here we go.
Have you ever wondered why we remember negative experiences more vividly than positive ones? It's due to a concept called negativity bias. Negativity bias is our tendency to focus more on negative events. It's why insults linger longer than compliments, and why bad news grabs our attention more than good news. This bias deeply affects how we judge others. For example, a study found that if an interviewer initially liked a candidate for a job, just 3.8 pieces of negative data about the candidate were needed to change their mind and reject the unlucky applicant. But it took 8.8 pieces of positive data, more than double, to shift an initial negative impression to a positive one. Negativity bias is rooted in our survival instinct. Ignoring good traits isn't dangerous, but overlooking bad traits might be. So we're wired to be on alert for negativity and to err on the side of caution. Now let's explore another concept that affects our judgment of others: fundamental attribution error. Imagine you're stuck in traffic and a driver cuts the line by riding the shoulder. Your instinctive reaction might be, "What an arrogant jerk!" But that reaction is a classic example of the fundamental attribution error, where we overemphasize personality traits and downplay situational factors. Who says the driver is arrogant? Maybe they're rushing to a hospital, but our minds instinctively jump to internal attributions. That driver is entitled, instead of considering external situational factors. Of course, sometimes the person who behaves negatively does have negative characteristics or intentions, but research has shown that it's not nearly as often as people think. Understanding these two biases, both well documented by research, raises important questions. How do these biases affect our relationships? What can we do to reduce their impact? What do you think?
All right. Alex, you're up. Free. There you go. Listen. Straight from Boca. Taking care of us. All right, dear friends, this is the problem. We got to get down the problem. We all know it's instinctively we kind of have this problem. Intuitively, we know we got this problem. But modern psychology tells us really what we're all suffering from. We are heavily biased towards negativity. And there's two manifestations of it. The first one's basically the idea that we remember we're more biased to negative things that happen to us. It's really a good thing because that's the idea. It's how we survive. Whenever something which is offensive, which hurt us, we file that. It's like that. We know that for the future, we don't want to get ourselves back in that situation. Good things, it's not as important to remember. It's not important to survive. So you could even blame it on the survival instinct. Part of living is you have a survival instinct. Every animal has it. Therefore, we have a negativity bias. Okay. Then we have something called a fundamental attribution error, which I don't know if the video does a good job explaining. There's 2 points of the fundamental attribution error. One is that whenever something happens, we assume the worst. Meaning, I'm going to interpret what you did in the worst possible way. Are we humans like that? Or am I the only one? Right? Meaning, I don't mean it in the most nefarious way, but somebody hurt us, somebody offended us, somebody this. We right away interpret it in a negative way versus saying, actually maybe, give them the benefit of the doubt. That's fundamental attribution error. But more fundamentally, fundamental attribution error is when you kind of give a character assessment and a character assassination to the guy because of one thing that happened. Like this. Negativity bias, focus on shortcomings over strengths. That's this bias. And then we have fundamental attribution error, which is number 1, we attribute malicious intent and we attribute a character flaw. Not only you did a mistake, but you're now a horrible person. You did something wrong, you're now bad. Not you did something bad. You are bad, right? That's fundamental attribution error. We're assuming the worst, we assume malicious intent, and now we're going to put that on your character. It's not something you did, you are bad. Now, is it bad that we suffer from these 2 biases? I don't know. It's how we are. Humans are more or less wired. Generally speaking, some suffer from these more than others, but part of being a human is they're probably going to suffer from these 2 biases. The question is, what do we now do with these? What do we now do with these? There's a somewhat famous line in Jewish tradition, knowing the problem is already halfway towards the solution. Ever heard that one before? First, let's diagnose the issue. Diagnosis is not just a way to figure out what the solution should be. It itself is part of the solution. When you know the problem, we already know how to deal with it. This is the problem. We all have to realize that we are actually not being even-handed in our relationships. When we start getting upset at somebody, and we get offended by things, and we want to distance ourselves in a certain relationship, and we take things personally, very often we are being heavily weighed down by these two biases which are pushing us in one direction over the other. What do we do about these? How do we react to them? So, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be dealing with challenges and fractures in relationships, and there's going to be 3 different approaches we're going to be taking, 3 steps in the coming weeks. And I want to show you what we're going to be doing over the next 3 weeks. So, in lesson 5, we're going to be talking about how we could be a person in other people's lives. What is our role? When is our role? What does that look like? To help other people grow and fix their flaws. That's a tough one. We're in a relationship. We have to support somebody. We have to give healthy space, and at the same time, help them along their path. It's a very sensitive topic. That's going to be lesson 5. Lesson 6 is when there was hurt, when there was betrayal in a relationship. What, when, how, if is the process of moving past that reconciliation. We're not going to be doing any of those today. Today, we're not going to be talking about what we actually should be doing within a relationship. Today, it's going to be all within our own head and mind. Today, we're turning inward. We cannot talk about how we're actually going to go and now approach another person in a relationship with us until we make sure that we are in the right place. Everything begins with attitudes. The way that we show up in relationships is all based on our attitudes. Today, that's what we're doing today. Today, we're turning into our own heart, mind, and soul to get the right attitudes. That's going to be today's class. Now, dear friends, I just want to process this with you for a moment and tie it back to the larger context before we really jump into today's topic. Let's remind ourselves about our 2 souls. If you think about it, the animal soul, which is a soul steeped in survival and a sense of self, this is the soul that suffers from the biases. Just think about it logically. The negativity bias is rooted in the survival instinct. Which soul is providing us the survival instinct? Animal soul. Attribution error. We're assuming the worst about the other person. Where does that stem from? That's really a little bit of arrogance. It's the natural arrogance and ego that we all suffer from. When I do something wrong, what do we say? It was a bad day, circumstances, whatever. I'm not a bad guy. Whatever, you caught me in a bad day. Is that what we say about ourselves? But when somebody else does it, I don't want to talk to you again. Look at you, you're nasty. I don't want to talk to you ever again. Very interesting, right? We have a double standard. If it's us. So this whole attribution error, fundamental, this is all rooted in the ego of the animal soul. The godly soul is the soul that enables us to rise above these biases that are really hurting our relationships. And the godly soul really wants connection. Because of that, once again, we're going to see that the key to healthy relationships is trying to bring out the voice of the godly soul more and more in our lives. And as we said, the more that we are soul people, it's going to spill into our relationships. It's only natural. And on the other hand, if we're not soul people, day round, week round, then what's going to happen in our relationships? You can't force it out just in a relationship. It goes hand in hand, which is really why, going back to the very first idea of the first class, relationships is not just about relationships. The key to relationships is, to quote Hillel, you remember, is the whole Torah. This is really everything. It's all of life. Because it's all about trying to move away from having the animal soul hijack our consciousness and have the godly soul's voice shine more and more. That's really interesting. So we know what the problem is. We got these 2 biases, negativity bias and fundamental attribution error, and we know where it's coming from. It's coming from the animal soul. Now we got to figure out what to do with this. How do we change this? How do we get back on the right track? So this is what we're going to be doing, and once again, this is all about internal. Today's class is actually going to be the first class we're not going to be having any practical tips. Because everything today is going to be playing out in our own mind and our own heart. This is going to be the things we have to be talking to ourselves. Today's class is going to be split into 3 parts, and this is the overview of what we're going to be doing. So just to help you understand what's going to be happening in today's class. Number 1, we're going to look at the Torah's guidance for how to overcome negativity bias. Problem number 1. Problem number 2, we're going to learn how to overcome the fundamental attribution error. And number 3, at the right end of today's class, we'll go a little bit deeper into a big philosophical truth, a big idea from Kabbalah, and we'll at least start touching it a little bit. We'll see how much we get into it. Ready? Ready to rumble? Feel free to fill yourselves up on a little bit more apple cider. And as we said earlier, if the snow keeps us in, we'll do like an all-nighter. David knows exactly what I'm talking about. We'll just, we're snowed in. We'll just enjoy ourselves. Okay. Dear friends, let's begin overcoming the negativity bias. Here we go. The great Maimonides. He tells us about how to be a well-balanced person, because a Jew has to be well-balanced. What does it mean well-balanced? Well-balanced is that there's a certain, Maimonides calls it a middle path, the middle of the road. You want to be balanced in everything. For example, some people are very, very frugal, which is, I guess, a nice thing, but it could get out of hand. Can't be too frugal. You can't make yourself some sugar. On the other hand, what's the other extreme? People are crazy spenders. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you know what I'm talking about? It's just so easy, right? Amazon, good sales. Too much spending. So what's the middle ground? There's, of course, a good middle ground. You got to find a healthy balance like everything in life. So giving charity is good. There's a point where somebody's giving too much charity. It's not good. You need money for your own family also. There's another extreme. Somebody has money and they're just hoarding money. I can't give charity. I don't have any money to give to charity. They're only giving a small amount. It's also not good. These are extremes. Extremes are never healthy. You need to find the middle ground. How do you find the middle ground in life? Maimonides is going to tell us a very big rule, which I think in today's world, it's not appreciated, the simple truth that Maimonides is about to tell us. Let's begin. You ready? Which side did I start with last week? This side. We start with you. Okay. So, Rick, it's in your hands. You could just, I don't remember. So you could, I'm just, what was that? It was with you. Okay, so Rick, let's begin text 3A. The first 2 texts of today were in the video. So, text 3A in your books, page 149. Let's crack open the books.
How can we cultivate proper attitude and traits so that they become ingrained features of our personality? We engage once, then a second time, and yet a third time in behaviors that embody the balanced ideal. We repeat the desired behavior consistently. Eventually, the proper actions become natural rather than difficult, seamlessly integrated into our characters.
The world assumes, conventional wisdom says, that your character decides what you're going to do. Who am I? What's my temperament? What's my personality? That's the way I act. Which is a truth to that, of course. We are manifestations of our personalities. But, says Maimonides, it also works the other way around. Your behavior influences your character. If you are suffering from extreme in a certain situation, or if you want to adopt the middle path, what do? Maimonides says just start practicing that muscle. Figure out what the middle path looks like and just start doing it. Once, twice, 3 times, like what? Like fake it till you make it kind of thing, right? But don't fake it, it's a good thing. Why are you faking it? Just do it. You don't feel it, whoever asked you to feel it. Right, just do it. Okay, if you do it a few times, Maimonides says what happens? It becomes ingrained in your nature, integrated into your character. It literally creates your mental and emotional attitudes. So Maimonides, one of the very interesting things Maimonides says, which is a very beautiful idea, is that Maimonides is against the whole concept of giving money to charity once a year, end of year giving. Why? You're doing a one-time thing. The point is not necessarily to give more money. The point is to give more often. Take that money, split it up into daily amounts, and give daily. Interesting idea. So if you give $365 to an organization a year, just to make it easy, give $1 a day. What does that do to you? You're not giving more money. The organization's not necessarily getting more money. Today in credit card charges, maybe we'll get even less money. But the point is, you're practicing the muscle of being a giver, of being a charitable person. It's a beautiful idea. My mind is pleasing this. Like, don't worry about your attitudes, your characters, your personalities. They could be a bit flawed. Figure out what the right thing to do is and do it. Okay. Simple idea. Now, Maimonides then addresses what happens if you are somebody, you know that you suffer from an extreme. What do you do if you suffer from an extreme? Let's say you're unbelievably frugal. Or you're a crazy spender and you don't know how to stop yourself. What do you do then? Let's read text 3b, page 149, and give us a read, Doug. Text 3b.
If you are already swayed to one extreme, distance yourself from it by moving to the opposite extreme and accustom yourself to it for a long time.
What happens when a piece of paper is bent in one direction? You want to kind of get it straight again. What do? You don't just flatten it out. What do you got to do? Put it in the other direction. Create a counter force all the way in the other direction. Maimonides says, okay, if you're just trying to get into a middle ground, the middle road, usually you just practice that. But if you suffer from an extreme, you got to now fight that by putting a total counterbalance. Swing to the total opposite extreme, do that for a long time, but then you will recondition to a healthy place, to the middle ground. Fight one extreme with another extreme. So, to use the example we've been giving, if you're a crazy spender, you're not saving, you're not being responsible with your money, what would Maimonides tell you have to do? Maimonides would say you have to go on a 6-month trial where you don't spend an extra penny, you watch your money like a hawk. You count every penny. Do that for 6 months. It's going to be a little bit crazy, meaning now you're suffering from the other extreme, which is not healthy. But at the end, you end up somewhere in a healthy spot afterwards. This is the way it works. Deliberately swing to the other direction to try to get yourself at a healthy equilibrium past that. Let's bring this to our discussion. We all suffer from extreme. What's the extreme we all suffer from? We all suffer in our relationships from negativity bias. That's a very unhealthy extreme. As humans, we're all wired to go extreme to the negative. We remember the negative, we amplify the negative, we stick with the negative. What would Maimonides tell us we have to do then? Become a little bit extreme, obsessive, to be positivity bias. Now, what does that look like? It means just like an insult or a negative event sticks really well, becomes memorable, make a conscious effort to focus and think and contemplate on positivity. Make the positive in our relationships front and center in a very big way. The same way we're going to obsess and we're going to get all emotionally worked up when something negative happens to us in a relationship, do that exact same thing. Focus and highlight mentally the good things. I'll tell you a little story. It's a beautiful little story. And we're talking before about the shluchim, so here's a little story. One of the Rebbe's very, very first couples, Chabad young couples in the late 50s, who took the Rebbe's call and agreed to open up a permanent Chabad post. Their name was the Gorelik family. Rabbi Gershon Mendel and Basi Gorelik. He passed away a few years ago. She's alive and well. So lange gesunte Jahren, as we say in Yiddish. Long and healthy years. Okay. She was an American girl. Okay. He came from a Russian family. They suffered in the former Soviet Union. They got out. The family moved to Israel, and he was a young yeshiva boy. And he left his home and came to America, to Brooklyn, to study in the Chabad yeshiva. And he was really alone, a young boy. His family's in Israel. No real communication. And the Rebbe was really like a father figure for him. The Rebbe really took personal care of this young Gershon Mendel Gorelik. So it wasn't like a typical relationship of just, here's my rabbi. And this. It was a very close bond, a very warm, like a fatherly bond that they had. The Rebbe was the one who matched him up with his wife. And then he became one of Chabad's first shluchim. And again, the Rebbe continued showing tremendous interest for him. And even educating him. The Rebbe would always make sure that he would bring back a gift for his wife every time he would visit Brooklyn. The Rebbe would say, did you get a gift for your wife? Go to the store, get her a gift. You're going back home. In any case, at one point, he was in Italy, and he was writing a letter to the Rebbe, updating the Rebbe on things. And he wanted to share with the Rebbe how his marriage is going. The Rebbe was his matchmaker, and the Rebbe was a real personal mentor in his life. And he wrote in a very warm and very gushing way, in a very loving way, how much he's enjoying his marriage to his wife. And just how appreciative he is and all of her good values and attributes. He writes in a whole paragraph. And then he finishes his letter off saying, you know, a little bit self-consciously, perhaps that wasn't so appropriate of me to write at such length about my wife's greatnesses. Like, you know, you're writing to the Rebbe. You know, you gotta write a love letter of what you think about your wife to the Rebbe. Like, you know, this was his letter. So he still sent the letter, but he finished off saying, you know, maybe I shouldn't have done that. What was the Rebbe's response? So very often what the Rebbe would do is he would respond to you by using your own words. It was one of the Rebbe's techniques sometimes. He would just cross out words and basically show you how you wrote the answer yourself. So he wrote, perhaps I shouldn't have written at such length about my wife's qualities. The Rebbe crossed out the word shouldn't. And the Rebbe underlined the words at length, which basically said, you should be speaking at length about your wife's qualities. That was the Rebbe's message to this young man. What's the idea? Yeah, we're going to be obsessive over negative things that happen in our relationships. So how do you fix that? The way to fix it is by equally going and adding force in the total opposite direction, obsessing over the goodness. What are the positive things? What are the good qualities? Let's make that very, very big. This is an art that we have to learn. And it's a very, very simple idea, but it takes a lot of practice. This is a muscle, like Maimonides tells us. Frankly, this applies to this idea and everything else we're going to learn in today's class. Sitting in 1 hour and a half class and listening to me talking about it is not going to cut it. This is something, it's a tool. We got to go home, practice this. Maimonides will do this once, twice, 3 times. A few times, we'll start counterbalancing the negativity bias, which is getting in the way of good relationships. Okay. Before we go on and develop this idea a little bit more, can we do a little bit of therapy for 2 minutes? With your permission? If it works, I'll charge you for it. Send you the bill. Okay. In your books on page 151, let's try this out right now. Take 2 minutes. Let's be a little bit vulnerable, and ideally even write this down. But if you're uncomfortable writing it down, at least really think it. But let's really do this. Page 151, choose any person from any of your 4 circles of support with whom you would like to enjoy an enhanced relationship. Remember, there's 4 circles of relationships. There's the intimate. There is, what are the rest of them? Friendship, exchange, participation, circles. So it could be anybody. It could be somebody, anybody. Who's somebody who you would like? You really value their friendship, their relationship with them. You want to grow it, and let's focus. Let's practice right now. Identify 3 of this person's positive qualities and think of specific incidents which illustrate, which is when you experience these 3 qualities. Let's try doing it right now. Let's do some positivity bias right here, right now. Let's give it a minute. Okay. Positivity bias is a muscle we need to practice. And if we do it often, it'll start becoming more real to us. Let's develop this a little bit more. What does this look like in real life? When you show up to a situation with positivity bias. Let's read this next text from the Talmud. Fascinating text. And what I like about it is it does not speak about a very intimate relationship. It speaks about a guest. That's a form of a relationship. You're a guest. Somebody has invited you to join them for dinner. Is that a relationship? Yeah, that's an example of a relationship. A friend invited you over. Let's look at what a guest which has negativity bias, what it looks like, and let's look at a guest who has positivity bias, what it looks like. You ready? Text 5, page 152, and we're up to you. Remind me your name again? Rachel. You want to read? Rachel? Mm-hmm. There you go. You want to read? Text 5, page 152.
My host extended.
No, Ben Zoma used to say.
Ben Zoma used to say, what does a good guest say? Guest, right? Guest.
Yes.
Okay. My host extended himself remarkably for me. Look how much meat he brought before me. how much wine he set before me, how many fine rolls he laid out before me. My host did this all just for me. Continue here.
Yes.
When I consider
No, what does?
what does a bad guest say? Can I consider this host as having extended himself for me? All I ate was one piece of bread. I ate just one slice. I drank just one cup. If this host exerted
Worked hard.
Yeah, it was only for his own wife and children. With regard to the good guest, the verse proclaims, he remembers to Outman what was done, singing people praises. With regard to a bad guest, it is stated, people therefore fear him.
All right, two guests. We got the good guest and the bad guest. We got the appreciative guests, we got the grumpy guests. Let's call them over here reducers and augmenters, or reducers and the amplifiers. What is the difference between these two people? Let's really tease it out. Let's look at the specifics over here. What are the differences between the way these two people describe the meal that they got to enjoy from their host? What do you say? What's going on over here? Any ideas? What are the differences? We got to analyze this piece of Talmud. What do you say, Hedy?
One is looking at like the glass half full, and the other is looking at the glass half empty. Like he didn't get enough, and the other one is saying that it's more than enough.
One is saying, let's look at it carefully over here.
The good guest is saying that he's very appreciative of what is given to him.
What was brought before me?
Right, and the bad guest is saying that it really
What are the?
wasn't remarkable what was brought before him.
No,
barely ate anything. It was hardly any work for the
Right.
host because look at I hardly ate
Right,
anything.
yeah, that's what, yeah.
You could either look. It's interesting. Neither of them are saying a lie. Just looking from very different perspectives. One is thinking about what he actually ate. One is looking at what was put before him. What was on that serving bowl? So the appreciative guest, what's he saying? Psh, look at this beautiful portion of meat over here that was put before me. He's not going to come and say, yeah, I only had one slice. Not that much work went into one slice. He's saying, no, look, whole piece of roast over here. This was a big deal. He's not focused on his one little roll that he ate. Yeah, I ate one roll. Saying, look, this host prepared beautiful rolls for us for the meal. Who's right and who's wrong? Which perspective is right, which one's wrong? It's true. Meaning, it's just, they're both true. I only ate one slice, and a full bowl was put before us. The question is, what are you going to focus on?
One's focusing from gratitude, appreciation.
One's, right.
But it's even more than that. One is
No, let's go. What's another thing?
one is only focused on what he did and says nothing about what the host did. You know, the host, right, I only did this. That's your problem. Your host put a whole big thing in front of you.
No, even
You only ate one piece.
he's not complaining he had only one piece. What he's saying is, I didn't eat that much anyways. And if the guy worked hard for the meal, it wasn't for me. I mean, like this. Did they work hard? The host worked hard? Yeah, you see the host worked hard. It's a good meal. But it wasn't for me. Why? I ate nothing of it. Who did he work hard for? He was serving his wife and children. Once he had a wife and children, okay, he invited me too to sit by the table because, like, once you're making a roast, you got an extra piece anyways. I'll eat the extra piece. What he's doing, he's twisting it and saying, yeah, it was very good. My one roll was insignificant. He worked hard for his family. I don't need to think that he worked hard for me. What does the appreciative guest say, the good guest say? He says the opposite. He did this all for me. He assumes that if I wasn't here, what would the guest be serving tonight? I don't know, some frozen dinner from put in the microwave type of thing. Why do they make a good meal? Because I'm here. So we have this general attitude that the reducer is diminishing the favor. I ate very little. The hard work was not for me. I don't need to be appreciative of his hard work. He's diminishing what happened over here. It was very nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm appreciative, but let's put it in perspective. I had one slice, one cup. It wasn't a big deal. The work was really for his family. I'm not going to make it as if he did it all for me. The good guest, the augmenter, all right, we lost that. He's magnifying what's going on over here. He's saying, the whole thing was for me. I know I only ate one slice, but you know why they put in so much work? Because I showed up. I'm so appreciative. They're also looking at it, one's looking at it from a big perspective. He's looking at all the work that was put in. One's only looking at it from what I ate. I ate so little. It wasn't a big deal anyways. By the way, if you want to nitpick over here, there's another very subtle but key difference between these two presentations. Let's think it through over here. I want you to look at the wording very, very carefully. I want to see if you could pick it up. This is a highly nuanced one. What is the difference between what the good guest says and what the bad guest says? Once you see it, it's glaring.
My host
Interesting.
versus this host. It's a personal relationship, my host.
You know what? I don't know if it's as strong in the Hebrew. The English translation, oh, that's a good one, though. That's a really good one.
One's all about what was done, and the other one's all about what he did for himself.
What he ate.
What he ate, what he did.
What else? That's a little bit what we already touched upon.
Okay.
No, let's go. I want to see if you could find this.
What is I?
Okay, the other one has me.
One it says
There's no I in me.
it's a lot in one, and also it's just saying it's only one piece, one cup, one.
Right, so we spoke about that before. One's looking at the whole dish being served, one's only looking at what he ate. Something else which we didn't speak about yet.
One says he brought it before me, the other one says, has he really extended himself? Like one.
This is going to be glaring once you see it.
He says that he did it all just for him.
Mm-hmm.
The other one says it was really,
For his own wife and children. All right, I think we already touched upon that. Okay, I'll give it to you.
One of them's
But I'm going to train you how to tear apart a piece of Talmud.
Many things, that he took many actions for him, where the bad guess was just, it wasn't for me.
Look at how he describes. The good guess first. How much wine he set before me. Sorry, sentence earlier. Look how much meat he brought before me. He's starting with the meat. He's saying clearly, meat. How much wine he set before me. How many fine rolls he laid out before me. Contrast that critically with what the bad guess says. All I ate was one piece of bread. What does he start with? Not with the meat, but with the bread. How do they each talk about the bread? Very differently. The first guy says, the good guess says, fine rolls. The bad guess just says, bread. Bread. Who's right and who's wrong? They're both right. It's bread at the end of the day, but it's nuance. You see what's going on over here? Then he says, I ate just one slice. Slice of what?
Bread or meat?
I only had one slice. You see what's going on over here? This is very subtle. Very subtle what's going on over here. I drank just one cup. One cup of what? He's not lying. This is so subtle. He also goes backwards. The good guest starts with the best dish. He's right away being focused to how good this meal was. Meat, wine, fine bread. The bad guest, he's starting from the low end. Bread. And then he can't even get himself to say meat, wine. It's so subtle, but once you see it, you see what's going on over here. This guy suffers from negativity bias. Now, here's my real question for you. Who's right and who's wrong? Is a good guest just being a little bit naive? Oh, look at this, they made the whole thing for me. Is the bad guest being a little bit too overly cynical? Which one's more in touch with the truth and which one's not? The beauty of the Talmud is, we don't know. I think they're both right. Maybe there's even truth to both.
And it's their truth.
Sometimes in life, we don't really get to know what really happened. Can I really know if my host was serving this anyways and they didn't even have to prepare anything more for me? I can't know. But what could we know?
good guest will be invited back.
Oh, the good guys can be invited back. We're going to get there in a second. I mean, the point is you create your own reality. You get to tell your own stories. Not always is there a right or a wrong. We're not going to go and fact check and say, host, please tell us, did you work extra hard because you had this one extra guest? It's irrelevant. The point is, how are you understanding what happened over here? What the Talmud is telling us is, you get to choose your bias. Negativity bias or positivity bias. And here's the key. What happens to the good guests? The people, right? Like Louis just said, he gets invited back. Does he have good relationships? Does he have a good day? He's having a good day. I just invited out for dinner. I'm so touched, and he's bursting with joy after that dinner. He's in a good mood, and guess what? He's going to be invited back. His relationships are doing good. What's happened with the bad guest? What does the Talmud say? The final sentence of the Talmud. People therefore fear him. Who wants such a guy in their life? A guy whose everything is interpreted in the most negative way. He's not going to be invited back. You know what? His life is miserable. He can't even appreciate the good things in life. You got invited out for a beautiful dinner, and you're complaining. He's not complaining. You're saying, I'm just being real. It wasn't a big deal. I'm appreciative. Just let's put it into perspective. What was that?
It was a bad day for him. That's why he was in
You could say that too, right?
And another guy that it was a good day for him. He was positive, you know.
The
That's
point is, you get to choose who you want to be. We could be people who are reducing goodness in life. That's negativity bias. Or you could be the guy who's an augmenter. He's the amplifier. He's focusing on the good. He's making a big deal out of that good. When he has a good day, when he's in a good relationship, he makes a big deal. And you know what? It's no big sin to take it over the top. So what? So what? You'll be extra appreciative. May it be your worst sin. Right? This is what Judaism is telling us over here. Our job is to move into this zone. Be the good guest. Be the good, positivity biased person in your relationship. And you know what? It does wonders. This is the first very important tip
So can
Judaism gives to us. Yes?
Can you substitute, to me, it doesn't sound like you substitute the word appreciative, or good for appreciative, and bad for unappreciative. I don't think that they can be substituted appropriately.
Could be.
Let's say the first person lost their house in a fire, and they're invited to dinner. This person's very appreciative, but then the second person, for whatever reason, is obligated to go to the dinner.
It's not these unappreciative. I appreciate it, but it wasn't a big deal. Meaning, I appreciate it, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to blow it more than it was. Understand?
What I'm saying is that maybe the circumstances under which these people were invited are different.
I'm sure the bad guest has great excuses for being a little bit underappreciative. The point is, you're in control of your own attitudes. The end of the day, you get to choose which guest you want to be. And of course, there are going to be times in life where you're going to be like, I don't even want to feel that appreciative to you. By the way, it's vulnerable to be very appreciative. To feel like, wow, you really did something amazing for me. It hurts our ego sometimes. We want to be like, nah, you did me a favor. I had to figure it out on my own. It's okay. I didn't need dinner from you. We also have this complex. We don't want to always take the favor. A good guest gets over his own ego. He checks his own ego, says, yeah, I'll take the favor. I'll fully appreciate what happened over here. I'm sure there's good excuses out of each situation. The point is, this is a general attitude we could have in life. Judaism says we need to fight that negativity bias, and the way to go is to be going a little bit to the extreme for the positivity bias. How does that sound? Doing good? With that, dear friends, we officially conclude part 1 of today's class. We're moving on to part 2. We discussed overcoming negativity bias. We're going to be talking about overcoming the fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error, to remind you, because it was about an hour ago, is that when somebody does something that we perceive as bad, maybe it even is 100% bad, we're not going to excuse that they did something bad. It was bad. It happens. People make mistakes. People do bad things. People could hurt us. People could just do nasty things, whatever it is. What stories do we tell ourselves? Fundamental attribution error is when we now go and assume the worst intent, and we assume that this colors who they are as a person. That's what I want to discuss with you right now. And we're going to explore this through a story in the Talmud. Another story from the Talmud. It's a heartbreaking story. I think we could relate to the pain of what's going on over here. Let's read it, then we'll We're going to read the story in 3 parts, all right? We're going to slowly make our way through this. Anna, would you like to read? Text 6a, page 156. Here we go, story from the Talmud.
What page?
156. We're moving along here.
Okay, a fellow once traveled south from the upper Galilee and was hired by a landowner for a 3-year tour. On the eve of Yom Kippur, the
Galilean.
asked his employer, "Give me my wages so I can go and feed my wife and children." The employer replied, "I have no money." The employee rejoined, "In that case, give me my wages in the form of produce," to which the employer insisted that he had none. "Give me my wages in the form of land," he pressed. But the employer replied that he owned no land. "Give me animals, I have none. Give me cushions and blankets, I have none." The worker slung his tools over his shoulder and left for home in
English. Horrible story, no? So the way it used to work in the olden days, people didn't have, not everybody.
It's interesting, but it's happened at this time too.
It happens also today. Yeah. People didn't have usually 9 to 5 jobs. So here's a story of a guy who's a Galilean. He lives in northern Israel. He got a job on a field on a wealthy estate down in the south. All right. Travels, he lives there for 3 years. This is what happens. You say goodbye to your wife and children. For 3 years, you don't see your family. You're working hard to be able to bring back some dough. His 3-year term is up. It's Erev Yom Kippur. He wants to go back home for the holidays. Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Where's my money? Got no money. Now, like, come on, whose leg are you pulling here? I worked on your fields. I know you got animals. You've got a whole estate. And the guy is literally in denial. I don't have any money. I don't have any property. I don't have any land. I don't have any pillows, no cushions, no animals. Goodbye, Charlie. It's a sad story, no?
Why didn't he ask him progressively, for some kind of progressive payments every month?
As we say in Yiddish, akasha famaisa. You know what that means?
Yeah,
You asking questions on stories? I don't know.
once important.
My father told me all that all the time. You ask, but what if? You ask a question on story? It's a story, isn't it? Why didn't he do this? This is a story. Okay, Shane. Okay, let's think about this. Did the employer mess up here? Is this bad?
Yeah.
This is bad. This is bad. If this happened to you, what would you be thinking about this guy?
Bad guy.
Man, guy. What a liar, a thief, a cheat, a selfish, greedy piece of you know what. What?
employer.
We don't even know what, exactly. Yeah, this is disgusting, horrible. I got no money. I'm going back to my family for 3 years, and you're making me go empty-handed. All right, let's continue with the story.
Let's get into
Karen?
employer shoes. We gotta get into employer shoes.
It's mean business, you know what?
Let's see. Let's see. Karen, let's read text 6b. The Talmud continues the tale, page 158.
After the festival, the employer took the workers' wages in his hand and set off for the workers' home. He took 3 donkeys, the first laden with food, the second with beverages, and the third with assorted delicacies. After they ate and drank together, the employer handed him his wages. The employer then asked the Galilean, "Tell me, when you requested your wages and I replied I had no money, what did you suspect?" Responded the employee, "I told myself that perhaps the opportunity to purchase merchandise inexpensively had just presented itself and you purchased it with the money you had, and so you had no money available. And when you requested animals and I said I had none, what did you suspect?" Replied the employee, "I told myself that perhaps the animals are rented to others. When you asked for land and I claimed to own no land, what did you suspect? Perhaps the land is leased to others. And when you asked for produce and I said I had none, what did you suspect? Perhaps they are not tied. And when I insisted that I owned no cushions or blankets, what did you suspect? Perhaps he consecrated all his property to heaven."
Look at this guy over here. He's championing through this over here. This employee. So first of all, he's getting paid over here. The story's ending pretty well. Took a few weeks, but the employer makes a trip all the way down, all the way up north to Israel, to his house, and says, I want to appease you. I'm bringing you food and drinks and good stuff, and I'm here to pay you. But what did you think about me? And he's saying, I assumed the best about you. I didn't want to assume that you're just a bad, greedy guy and that you would make me work for nothing and that you would cheat me out of it. So I decided to tell myself a different story. That maybe you were right. Maybe I caught you on the bad day, and even though it wasn't good, you knew that you had to pay me on this day. But whatever, you got stuck in deals. You know what people say? All right, all my money is tied up. That's what happened with you. Everything was tied up. You couldn't give anything. We'll continue the story in a moment. But here's my question for you. This employee, do you think he's a good husband? Employee, the worker. When he came home and for the first time in 3 years, and the house was turned over. Sure. Oh, you always leave the house turned over. You don't know how to keep the house under control. You know, is he that type of husband? Screaming at his wife? No, why not?
He didn't scream at his employer.
Because look what he's doing over here. He's not assuming the worst. What's he doing? He's assuming the best. This is called, he is overcoming the fundamental attribution error. You have a choice what to believe. Meaning you're going to be making up a story right now. You're writing a novel. What happened over here? You've got no freaking clue what happened over here. But you're going to make up what happened over here. That's what it means, right? We're telling ourselves stories. We get to choose what story we tell ourselves. We usually go and start making up a very nefarious story. The guy hates me, the guy's a this, the guy's a that, I'm never going to talk to him ever again in my life. That's kind of what happens in our minds. Some good Jewish jokes about that. I don't want to get us derailed over here on that thing. Without getting into the whole story, it's a good joke. But I'm going to kill it because I'm going to say it very, very quickly right now. Two Jews are sitting next to each other on the train. One Jew says to himself a whole story. Why is this Jew traveling on this train towards my city? It must be that he's going to come and he's going to ask me if he could borrow my shovel. Now, why is he asking to borrow my shovel? Because then he wants that he should be able to see me in shul and I should invite him for dinner. And then he's going to come to dinner. He's going to want to see my daughter because he has a son. He wants to do it. Made up a whole story. So after 5 minutes, stands up and says, don't even think about it. I'm never marrying off my daughter to your son. What? I know where you're going with this. But don't we all do that sometimes?
All over a shovel.
What was that? All over a shovel. See? Meaning, no one said this guy was right. Maybe this guy was very naive and he's being really extra generous with his assessment over here about what went wrong with this guy. And we're all agreeing the guy did something very, very wrong. You have an employee, you're paying him on time. But you get to choose what stories you tell yourselves. Okay, what's the end of the story? Very interesting twist for the end of the story. Text 6C, page 160. Mark, give us a read.
You want me to do it? No, I'm good. I feel like Paul Herman. You get that. The employer exclaimed, I swear that it was so. I had made a vow concerning all of my property, consecrating it to the temple. I did this because I was upset at my son, Hyrcanus?
Yeah.
For not engaging in Torah study, and I sought to disinherit him. When I later came to the sages of the south, they released all my vows. As for you, just as you judge me favorably, so may God judge you favorably.
All right, this guy's a hot-headed individual. He did something pretty rash. This is what he did. He didn't like that his son was acting like, rich man's son, entitled. And his son wasn't involved in the good religious life that his father wanted him to do. So his father wanted to blackmail him. He said, you know what? You think you're going to live the high life, you're going to inherit all my money and all my wealth, and you get to live such a life? I got news for you. I'm disinheriting everything I own. I'm giving it all to the temple. I don't own anything. You're not going to be getting a penny when I go. All right. We're not condoning this. Pretty bad parenting move right over here. Okay, but in any case, the fact was, this was the bad day that the employee came and asked him for his wages. So was it true that he didn't have anything to give to him? It's true. In Judaism, a vow is a very big deal. A vow is binding. Now, if somebody makes a vow and they did it in a heated moment, and they don't want to pull through with it, that's big business. You got to go. You have to annul the vow. It's a big deal. Not simple. The fact was, that moment, he couldn't give him any money. it was the truth. He didn't own any of his possessions. He had to go after the holidays and make a meeting with the rabbis and figure out how to annul the vow. Okay, let's not get too much into how the story finished over there. But here is the point. Whenever we go through something and somebody else did something wrong, and it's 100% the wrong thing, okay? We're not excusing what the person did. They did a bad thing. It's up to us to make up a story. And we make up stories. We usually jump to make up a pretty bad story. Fundamental attribution error. That's usually what we do. We have to ask ourselves, number one, how sure am I that my story that I just made up, which is usually going to be painting the other person pretty maliciously, how sure am I that that's indeed the truth? And is there, perhaps, another hypothesis that could work that actually makes the guy not look so bad? Is it possible? Check your biases. That's it. How sure am I that the story that I have in my mind, that I intuitively came to, is the truth? That's it. It's a very simple question to ask yourselves. I think most of the time we'll say, yeah, you know what, it's just an hypothesis. I made up a story. Either it's true or it's not true. Yeah?
So I'll give some rabbinic wisdom from my career, since I get to hear rabbinic wisdom from your career. The other piece that we're not thinking about here as a bankruptcy lawyer is that these two people know each other. They've worked together for 3 years. So this guy may be judging him based on
Precedence.
and knowledge of who he is. And I mean, I have a great joke about this that I'll tell after class if anybody wants to hear about it. True story, but true now. But in any event, they know each other. So maybe he's not so naive in judging him. Maybe he had a sense of what was going on.
Or maybe not. Not always was there strong employer-employee relationships. And I think the point stands regardless. It could be somebody you know very well, somebody you don't know any. I'll tell you another story from the Talmud. And it's a good story. Hillel was a very great sage, which is, by the way, he was a little bit second class, because he was a Babylonian rabbi. When you're a Babylonian rabbi living in Israel, we respect your opinion, but, take a seat in the back. Type of thing. Let the Israeli rabbi speak first over here. Whatever. So Hillel was always a little bit, so he really rose the ranks, but whatever you want to call it, supremacy, racism. Okay. Any case, Hillel was hosting an Israeli rabbi in his home for dinner. One of the big hotshot rabbis, Israel rabbis, Jerusalem rabbis, not a Babylonian rabbi. For dinner. This is a big, big deal. You don't want to mess up when you got an Israeli big rabbi coming to you for dinner. The Israeli rabbi is coming to Hillel for dinner, and guess what happens? There's no food. No food. And they're just waiting around. Where's dinner? No, we don't know what's dinner. They're working in the kitchen. There's no dinner. The Israeli rabbi is getting very turned off over here. Like, come on. I'm a big deal. I'm an Israeli rabbi. You're a Babylonian rabbi. You're gonna make me wait around over here? Like, oh, you came? Now we'll make dinner. I expect dinner to be ready. The Israeli rabbi was kind of freaking out over here. He wasn't taking this well. Hillel didn't flinch. What's the stereotype of like the nervous husband? Right, you got company over. I don't mean to rush you, right? Go to the wife. But just, how long do you think it's going to be? How much longer, right? No rush, just hurry up. Type of thing, you know what I'm saying? All right, Hillel never once stood up to go ask his wife, come on, we're late, you're making me look bad. Israeli rabbis here. Hillel never once, they're waiting for an hour and a half. Finally, after an hour and a half, the wife comes out with freshly steaming hot food. And she says, let me explain what happened. Right before our esteemed guest came, individual who's in need knocked on our door and said that he has a family and they're starving, they don't have any money, and they asked if we have any food for them. And I said, you know what? I have a freshly baked dinner. Let me help out your family. I gave the whole thing to them. I understood that was an important mitzvah. So please excuse my delay in the food. And Hillel said right away, I knew she had a good reason. I didn't need to go ask. It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. That's a sign of a good, healthy marriage. But it's just so beautiful. It's so easy. Forget about fundamental attribution error. It's so easy to start getting stressed out. Why are you late? Make me look bad. Starting to create stress in the house. Mark never does that. No, nobody here.
You would be so stressed I cooked, you wouldn't even know what to do.
We're speaking in theory. This is a hypothetical situation, not like anybody. Hillel, it's okay. Assume the best. Assume the best. Okay, in the case of Hillel, his wife didn't do anything wrong. But assume the best even if something did go wrong. Sometimes we're not excusing bad behavior, but we're not going to make up a bad story. That's the difference. This is the very first thing that we need to know. Check our fundamental attribution error bias and ask ourselves this question. If we could stop telling ourselves all these bad stories, automatically assuming malicious intent, all of our relationships, there's no question, can be a lot better. You're going to avoid all this hard feelings and ill will. And we're building understanding and appreciation and trust between each other. This is what it takes.
Would that just be this overcoming fundamental attribution error, just giving someone the benefit of the doubt?
That's level number one. That's level number one. We're going to get to level number two. Simple as that. Now again, these sound very simple, but these are all muscles which need to be practiced. So it's like watching somebody else, listening to me talk about this, like watching somebody else doing exercise. Looks good in theory, right? You got to do the hard work at the end of the day. See, these are things we take a lot of, we have to stop ourselves. It goes even deeper. The next part of fundamental attribution error is that we say this person's a bad person. And we take the moral high ground. We say, I'm a good guy, and you're a bit of an idiot. What's wrong with you? I'm human, you're human. Why are you acting this way? You're a bad person. That's part of fundamental attribution error. We paint the other picture as being a bad person, and we become very judgmental. I don't accept that you're so bad. Some things we're willing to accept that, okay, you're human, you make mistakes, I make mistakes. But then when somebody doesn't make mistakes like you make mistakes, what do we start doing? We start becoming really judgy against the other person. And we say, you're bad. You're a failure of a human being. Right? That's harsh. This is a deeper level of fundamental attribution error. We color the whole person. It's a character assassination. You're bad. I don't like you. You're not good company. Now, it's possible this person really is a bad person, does a lot of bad things. Are we excusing the bad things they do? No. Level number one is maybe we can at least tell ourselves a good story. What are the circumstances that played into them making this mistake? Level number two goes a lot deeper. Our sages tell us a very tough pill to swallow. And it sounds like such a beautiful ideal. When you think about it, it really is a tough pill. Text 7a, page 162. Lisa, let's give us a read. This is such, you're like a living exhibit here for our classes.
Exactly. All right.
Thank you. I should be paying you for showing up over here.
You want A or B or both?
Right now, just A.
Okay. Do not judge others until you have reached their place.
All right. Our sages say you're not allowed to judge other people. Okay. Simple as that. You could judge them once you get to their place. The only problem is what? You'll never be in their place. Okay. Or as the more Western version of it goes, don't judge somebody else until you walk them out in their shoes. And you know what the spin-off of that one is? Why shouldn't you judge them when you walk them out in their shoes? If you do walk them out in their shoes, you won't even care anymore. You're a mile away from the guy, and you have his shoes. Why judge him anymore? Okay.
So, Rabbi Lady, you mentioned that before that text. It was interesting. You said if people say you're a bad person, this, that. I think a lot of people don't even act on those emotions. They just let it go. I mean, isn't that a truism when you think about it? And a lot of people.
Most people let it go as in what?
Well, I'm just thinking that you said like you're doing this. You're a bad person. You're not a normal human being. And all
We don't say it. We don't say it.
Yeah.
But we think it. And we act upon that.
Yeah.
You're a bad person. I don't even like your company anymore. You're not being invited to the next party. Nothing personal. Just I don't enjoy
Not
it.
necessarily saying it.
Yeah. It's all about what's happening in your mind. Yeah, it's you're thinking it. And you're starting to change attitudes. You're not warm anymore to this guy. I know too much about you. I don't want to be friends with you anymore. Type of thing. Now, here's my question for you. Why shouldn't you judge other people? Why not? Seemingly, we should be able to judge other people. Look, I'm a good guy. You're a bad guy. Why can't I judge you? So, in the Tanya, classic book of Hasidic wisdom, it really develops this idea. Don't judge another person until you've reached their place. Meaning, you don't know their place. You actually can't judge them. It's not that it's not nice to judge other people. It's like a Jewish value. Oh, we don't think it's nice to judge other people. It's not that it's not nice. It's a lie. It's a lie that you are able to judge another person. And the idea is you're not in their place. You have no clue what they're going through. You have no clue what their life was like. You have no clue what their life is like. And therefore, it's not that it's not nice to judge, it's that you simply don't have the tools. You don't have the data to judge them. And the Tanya shows us how there's two levels of what it means by place, reaching their place. What's their place? Number one is their environment. You don't share the same environment as this other person. Now, what does that mean? Well, what do you judge them about? What you're judging them about, well, 1 second. What does their home life look like? What does the environment at their job look like? You don't know what type of stresses they go through. You don't know what kind of tests they have to go through. And if we want to talk about environment, you don't know what their upbringing was like. You don't know what the challenges they face, which nobody knows about, is like. So the whole idea of that environment could be, unfortunately, giving somebody a hard test. Now, we're not excusing their bad behavior, but the point is you can't judge them for reaching this bad behavior because you don't know what it means to go through what they're going through. That's environment. And then there's another one. There's also something called spiritual place. What's going on inside of you, meaning your spiritual level. You know, the animal soul is the source of all of our trouble. And it's very interesting. How many different animal species are there in the world? How many? What do you say? Thousands. All right, we don't even know. Okay, thousands. So let's think about that there's thousands of different species of animal souls. My animal soul is not like your animal soul. One animal soul could be like a goat. It's tame, it's cute, only makes a little bit of trouble, not too much. Then you got another animal soul, that's what? It's a bull. It gets mad. It has aggressiveness. I don't know what, the point is, you could say, I don't suffer from this temptation. I don't suffer from this challenge. And you know what we'll say? Good for you. You have an animal soul that's not giving you, applying the pressure here about this issue. How could you judge somebody else when you don't even understand what it means to have an animal soul that's giving them these challenges? So the big idea is, we could go and say something is wrong, meaning somebody is doing something wrong. That's fine. We're not saying you're not allowed to know what's right and what's wrong. You're allowed to have moral clarity. Something is wrong. Something is right. But you're going to judge another person for being that way? That no. Why not? How could you judge? And the big idea is, if you had to go through what they went through, who said you would end up looking any better? So again, if it's somebody who's a bad person, you're allowed to say, I want to protect myself. I'm not going to be hanging out with you. Not in a negative, judgy way. Just like, I need to protect myself. But I'm not going to judge the other person. I could even respect him as a human being. He makes mistakes. I make mistakes also, by the way. And as the line goes, I once heard, don't judge somebody else for sinning differently than you. Right? We all sin. So we only judge somebody else when it's not like me. You're sinning, just not like me. You got your own sins. Let's read that in Tanya, and Lisa, read that as well. Text 7b, page 162, if you're up for it.
Do not judge others until you have reached their place. This is because their place, that is, their environment, causes them to engage in the undesirable behavior. Their livelihood requires of them to navigate the marketplace all day and to linger at the street corners. Thus, their eyes witness all temptations, and what the eye sees, the heart desires. Additionally, the nature of their instinctive impulse leads them to the undesirable action, for it burns in them like a baker's fiery oven. Fiery oven?
Fiery.
The instinctive impulse is not the same in everyone.
First of all, you don't understand what they have to go through on a daily basis. You're simply not in their environment. You're privileged. You get to have a calmer environment, simpler worker environment, less stress, who knows what. Less pressure. And you don't know what's going on inside of them. Some people, when they have an animal soul that's putting pressure on them to make mistakes, it's not just applying a little bit of pressure. It's harassing them. It's like a baker's fiery oven. The idea of a baker's oven is that it never goes off. Baker's oven is working 24/7. Even when they're not baking anything, it's still burning. A home oven, you shut off. A real bakery never shuts off an oven. So the point is, we have over here this fundamental attribution error, and we want to paint what other people do and say they're a bad person. Again, we're allowed to say that something is bad. It's a bad thing for a human being to do this. That's okay. But to now go and judge the other person and paint them as a bad person, that Judaism says not only is it wrong, it's a lie. It's not true. So these are truths we simply have to remind ourselves of. So now, dear friends, I want to recap with you as we conclude today's class, and I want to get one last point in over here. We still have one big point I want to get in over here, like another hour or so. Just kidding. Okay. Number one, the tools that we learned today is dwell on virtues. Don't dwell on negativity. Let's try to work on building up that positivity bias. There's a great book, by the way, called Positivity Bias. You could buy it on Amazon. What's the subtitle of it? Positivity Bias. Yeah, it's all about how the Rebbe taught positivity, like we saw in the video. Dwell on virtues. Number two, augment, which means really, really amplify the benefits, the goodnesses of the people in our lives. Number three, attribute failings to unique circumstances. Okay, they did something wrong, but you know what? Let me try to find a story that will make it, it's not so bad. They didn't do it out of malicious intent. It was a mistake. It was a mess up. Okay, I can find a good circumstance for that. And number four, realize that you can't judge them for what they did. Maybe in their position, you may have done the exact same thing. Maybe you would fail the exact same way they are. You are in no position to judge them. And if we're not judging people, once again, what will our relationships look like if we're not passing judgment on other people? There's no question. More beautiful relationships. Okay, 5 more minutes, dear friends. One final point for you. We have 4 beautiful ideas. A cynical guy may say, you know what, these sound like beautiful values, and I'm sure that if I did this, my relationships would be better. But you're a pretty optimistic guy. People make mistakes, you're assuming the best. I'm a realist. What does the realist say? I've seen enough in life. I'm not going for any of this cute tips for how to have better relationships. The question is, everything we've learned about today, are these just good pieces of advice, or are they rooted in real truth? The realist could say, nah, I'm not buying it. I'm a little bit more realistic. I know better. People are bad. Like the joke goes, we don't have time for it, but we'll say it anyways. A synagogue in Tennessee needed to hire a new rabbi. Their rabbi retired. So they called up the rabbi recruitment agency, the bureau, whatever that was, back in the 60s. We need a rabbi. Okay, there's a rabbi who finished his term in Rhode Island. He's available. He could become your rabbi in Tennessee. So the board in Tennessee writes a letter to the synagogue in Rhode Island. We want to have a resume. We want to understand what the board thinks about this rabbi. The board from Rhode Island writes back to the synagogue board in Tennessee. This rabbi, he's a rabbi like Moses, and he's a rabbi like an angel. Come on, can you get better than that? Moses and an angel. They right away take a vote, unanimous vote, that we are signing a 10-year contract with this rabbi. And the rabbi comes in the first Shabbos, the whole shul sees they were duped. This guy is bad. He has no skill. He has no nothing. He doesn't know how to lead a service, doesn't know how to read the Torah, doesn't know how to give a sermon. And he's not even a nice guy. He's not, he just doesn't understand social skills. He's not. The board is furious. They write a letter to the synagogue in Rhode Island. Why did you cheat us? You wrote to us such praises about the rabbi. And look what you sold us here. This guy is a lemon. Now we're stuck with him. So the synagogue from Rhode Island wrote back to the synagogue from Tennessee. We were being extremely honest. Just like Moses couldn't really speak well, this rabbi also can't speak. And he's just like an angel. He's not a mensch. There you go, like Moses and like an angel. Okay.
But didn't say that they wanted to get rid of him.
The point is, right? Some people are just bad. You want me to buy in? Oh, let's get positivity bias. Don't buy into saying any of these stories. So, dear friends, indulge me for just 5 minutes over here. Let's go through a big idea, but briefly. And we'll do it with I love this text 8, page 165. A little poem written by Shel Silverstein. You know who Shel Silverstein, the writer, songwriter?
My mom used to read me
His stuff?
I read them to my children.
Oh, that's nice. So, Max Newman, give us a read of Shel Silverstein's text 8.
I asked the zebra, are you black with white stripes or white with black stripes? And the zebra asked me, are you good with bad habits or are you bad with habits? Are you noisy with quiet times or are you quiet with noisy times? Are you happy with some sad days, or are you sad with some happy days? Are you neat with some sloppy ways, or are you sloppy with some neat ways? And on and on and on and on and on and on he went. I'll never ask a zebra about stripes again.
Beautiful. It's a very, very deep poem. We all have good days, we all have bad days. We all know that we have a force within us that wants to do tremendous good, wants to rise above ourselves, be altruistic, be spiritual, tap into something greater than ourselves. And we all know that we're also selfish and self-serving and a little bit arrogant and a little bit... Who are we? Who's the real me? So you could say, well, you're complex. You got a little bit of both. You know, you're a mixed bag. But no. Who's the real me? If we could peel away all the layers of that onion and get to the real core, what's the real me? It's a very tough question. The poem is kind of implying there's no real you. It's like asking a zebra, black and white. I don't know, both. You're asking silly questions. But Judaism says, no. Who's the real you? Now, if you look at it from if you have to look at life, which soul, practical life, the way my life plays out, which soul gets to express itself more in my life? The godly soul or the animal soul? Which soul is expressing itself? Which soul gets to have more control in my life on a regular day-to-day basis?
We choose.
I'm not talking about what you're going to choose tomorrow. I'm saying today and yesterday, what you already chose. Which soul is expressing itself more in your life? Do we all agree with that?
Yes. Do we have to?
What was in last week's class? Okay, in any case. If I want to be real, the animal soul. We wake up in the morning. What do we think when we wake up? I'm hungry, I'm hangry, I'm tired, I don't want to wake up right now. Okay, right, where's my coffee?
It's too cold.
It's too cold. That's all animal soul talk. And then we're going to go, are we going to eat breakfast? God has a mission for me today, so I now need to eat breakfast like that. We don't think that. What do we think? I'm hungry. Let's eat breakfast. That's it. We're feeding our animal soul. So it's easy to maybe think, you know what? Maybe I'm an animal soul, and I happen to have a godly soul. Which one is it? Let's put this up over here. Who's the real you? Which one of these souls is the real you? Comes Kabbalah and says like this. Let's read text 9. Cheryl, page 166.
And God said, let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness.
When God makes the first human prototype, how does God describe him? We're making humankind in our image and our likeness. That's what makes humans different from the rest of all of creation. Everything else, God's creating a creature, a creation within our world. Okay? A human, what does God say? It's going to be in our image. It's going to be a reflection of God. This is where Kabbalah says, don't think that a human is just a more sophisticated animal. The next creature on the food chain. There's something fundamentally different about a human being, which is they reflect God. This is how God describes a human being in one sentence at the beginning of creation. This verse, Kabbalah tells us, is the source that who is the real human being? The reflection of God, the godly soul. That's the real you. In other words, let's just think about it this way. You're not an animal soul that happens to have a godly soul. You are a godly soul that happens to also have an animal soul. Or in other words, put even differently, when we are living a life of animal soul, we're actually not living our real life. We're not really being authentic to our true self. That's not our true self. We're living a life somewhat in denial. We deviated from our real life. Real life is godly soul. Now, the problem is that maybe that's not most highest percentage of our life is not godly soul. That doesn't matter. It's like, how do you look at a kid? Is my kid a bad kid because he makes trouble the whole day? Or is my kid a good kid just because he happens to make trouble the whole day? Which one is it? Right? Who are we really? Are we our flaws? Or are our flaws something that we got stuck into? But they're not the real me. They're not the real person. Let's read text 10. Alex, want to read this? Text 10, page 167. This is from the Rebbe, a very powerful text.
The Rebbe talk about crafted an adage. Just as we need to know the shortcomings, so we need to know our advantages. The anomaly in this phrase is that it refers to our advantages, whereas with regard to shortcomings, it merely refers to the shortcomings, not to our shortcomings. The explanation, the Torah introduces discussion of atonement process with the words, if a soul sinned, the Zohar, however, raised this as a rhetorical exclamation, a soul sinned. Is that possible? The concept of sin is completely alien to our beings. Even when they stumble, God forbid, our lapse does not undermine our identity, rather it is something external to our nature that has latched onto us.
Fascinating idea. Very deep. Even when a person is not living up to their true best selves, they're not a bad person. It's an external, they're living a lie. They're not living their true self. The real self is a good, pure place. It's an interesting thing. How should we be defining ourselves? How should we be seeing ourselves? You could say, I'm not a bad person. I have some bad things I've done. I'm not bad, right? It's a subtle question of how do we define ourselves? What Kabbalah says is that when you assume the best in other people, it's not just a good relationship tip. You're actually getting in touch with the deepest truth of that person. There's something very profound about that. In a certain sense, you are tapping into their truth. So don't ever be scared about doing that. And Kabbalah says even if they're not the best person, when people reflect to other people good intention, and the person is really a good person, that actually helps inspire them. It brings out their goodness. But I'll conclude with a final little story, and then we'll wrap it up. On a final note, a little story. All right, traditional European Jewish folktale. There's a poor little simple Jew. He's traveling around. He's trying to make some money, kopeck here, kopeck there, and he's catching a train tomorrow morning. He's away from home. He has a 6 a.m. train. He has to be at the train station at 5 o'clock a.m. He goes to the local inn, arrives there at 11 a.m. Another Jew is the innkeeper, and he says, I only got a few hours I need to sleep before I catch my early morning train. Do you got a bed you could give me? The innkeeper says, I'm sorry, I'm all booked out. He says, you got to help me out. I've got a big business trip tomorrow, and I'm traveling, and I'm so tired. Just help me out a little bit. So the guy says, listen. At the top floor in the suite, a Cossack soldier has the suite. There's another bed in his room, but he's not going to be happy if he finds out that someone else is sleeping with him in his room, but he's already sleeping. If you slip into bed without making any noise, you get up before he gets up, I'll let you sleep there. So he says, deal. If you could just wake me up at 4 a.m., I want to make sure I don't miss my train. No problem. He opens the door. This little Jew slips right into bed, and before he could even blink, he's being woken up by the innkeeper. You got a train to catch. Okay. Right away, puts on the clothes, runs to the train station, and as he's walking on the platform, there's a little mirror hanging on the wall, and all of a sudden he takes a double take. A Cossack is looking back at him. He, by mistake, put on the Cossack's clothing. And he says, that foolish innkeeper. He woke up the Cossack. Now I'm going to be late. It sounds like a foolish story. It is. But don't we all do that to ourselves? Don't we do that to everybody else? We judge them by the clothing they're wearing. And we're not looking into the truth of who they are. So dear friends, what we really are is a divine image, a divine soul. That is our essential self. And dear friends, everything makes so much more sense when you look at it from this perspective. And on that note, let us wrap up for tonight. I want to thank you all for joining. Next week, we're on to lesson number 5, the art of influence. And may God bless you all. We got some good stuff coming up.
Thank you for this.
So God bless you all. Take care. Good luck with integrating all these big ideas. And we'll catch up next week again.